What is going on, everybody? Welcome into our next top 10 positional breakdown video here for the 2022 NFL Draft. Today we have a loaded edge rusher group, and it's a group that I have some differing opinions here compared to what you're seeing with the consensus rankings out there, so I'm really excited to get into this one. Please do hit that like button if you enjoy. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoy, you want to see some more draft content. Also, I really appreciate you guys. If you love my draft content, check out my Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy, where you can not just support my channel, but you will get more draft content. You'll get my full draft board with player write-ups. You can see not just my top 10 edge rushers, but information on every edge rusher in this class, every player in this class at every position. You'll get exclusive film breakdowns. We have a couple up on some of the guys in this class, guys like Hutchinson, Thibodeau, Karlaftis, up there on Patreon. You'll also get team-specific 7-round mock drafts in April. So lots of great draft content up there on Patreon. If you enjoy my draft content, you'll love the TFG Draft Insider package over there, and I really do appreciate you guys showing your support. It means a lot. But let's go ahead and get started with my number 10 edge rusher, and it's going to be Myjai Sanders out of Cincinnati. And Sanders is not like pretty much everybody in this class in that he's really not a high upside guy, but I really like his game. He's just a very complete player, and he's someone that brings a specific role to the table. I think he's that third edge rush player on your team, which doesn't sound important, but these guys play a lot of snaps for a lot of teams. You want a guy that can give your starters a chance to, take some hits on the gas mask on first and second down, get ready for third down, stay fresh, but you need a guy that can get out there and defend the run on early downs and also not get lost on play action and get after the quarterback when the other team does pass the ball. And every team really is looking for a third edge rusher for that reason. And I think Myjai Sanders has a really high floor as a guy that can do that immediately, especially in 3-4 systems where he's going to be playing from a 2-point stance where he can really utilize his quickness. And that is his most defining trait, because he's not the fastest guy and he's certainly not the strongest guy. In fact, he came in at like 228 pounds at the combine, and honestly, that's a big reason a lot of people aren't talking about him, because it was just kind of this bizarre story. He was at 245 pounds at the Senior Bowl. The story goes he was sick, still wanted to come out and compete, and I really respect that. But, he came back at his pro day yesterday at 245 pounds, and that seems to be behind him. So we can focus on what he can do at the next level now that he's not 228 pounds. And again, he's got this unique play style. He's not someone that flies around the edge. He's not this dominant bull rusher. He doesn't even have your typical skill set as far as pass rush moves, but he's just very crafty. And for a lack of a better term, I just love his field awareness and game feel. He has incredibly quick feet, and he uses his arms well, and he's balanced, so he just kind of distances himself very well from opposing blockers, whether it's in the run game or as a pass rusher, and he navigates his way in and around blocks. So, he doesn't have this traditional pass rushing skill set. I don't think he's going to be a dominant starting 3-down edge rusher. We talked about that, but on early downs, he works his way to the quarterback. I think he's going to be effective in play action. He's going to shut down play action boots very well. And he's better in the run game than you would think. And hell, he actually has stronger arms than you would think at times. He shows a little bit of ability to convert speed to power in just little ways. It's never going to be a true strength of his. But this is also going to announce that one of the premium edge rushers in this class, viewed by many, is not going to make my top 10, and that is Boye Mafe out of Minnesota. So again, it's a very good class, but at the same time, I'm just frankly not as high on Boye Mafe. Not going to make this list. A lot of people are going to be asking, where is he? You're seeing him in NFL Network mock drafts in the first round and stuff, and he's an athletic freak. I'm from Minnesota. I have every reason in the world to buy into him, but I was really underwhelmed by his tape. For all of his athletic measurables, they just weren't applied to wins on the football field, not team wins, like him winning reps. So lower on Boye Mafe, not going to crack the list here, but it's a high floor deal with Myjai Sanders. I think he is a guy that can come in right away. But again, if you're looking for more of that upside and a guy that might eventually be a 3-down starter for you, maybe you are talking a little bit more about a Boye Mafe. But I don't think you want Boye Mafe on the field day one. So it is a little bit of a preference there with those two guys, depending on what you're looking for. But let's get into my number 9 player here, Nik Bonitto. And talk about upside here. My comparison for him is a literal ball of lightning. He has no skills. He has no idea what he's doing out there. But God, this guy's just get off and speed and bend, just punch you in the face. And they punch offensive tackles in the face at times. But his inconsistency is off the charts, frankly. And again, there's not really any pass rush plan there at all. He doesn't convert speed to power, or at least he doesn't try to. He just kind of flies off the edge and tries to bend around the corner. And a lot of times it works, and a lot of times he just kind of gets flushed out of the play and runs way past the quarterback, losing contain. He doesn't have an inside move that he's working on, but again, was very inconsistent with that. He is a ball of lightning with this just conglomerate of raw, explosive traits. And you hope with NFL coaching being kind of pointed in the right direction a little more out of the Big 12, where coaching and systems just aren't what you typically see, maybe he can start to harness some of this athletic ability. But he is the definition of a boom or bust prospect. You could take him and he can't see the field because he's just doing the same thing every time, and tackles can just push him out of the play like we described. But if you can teach him to bull rush and develop an inside move, and frankly defend the run a little bit better, play with some better discipline, there's really high upside here with Nik Bonitto. It's going to take good coaching, but you really can't deny the upside. The way he moves on tape, it's just different than a lot of these guys. So that's Nik Bonitto at number 9. Number 8 is Drake Jackson, who's another very kind of raw, toolsy player, and he's been kind of the forgotten man in this group. He was once upon a time viewed as a first-round prospect, but just didn't take that step up in his junior season. He's a guy that's been starting at USC since his freshman year. He's a very experienced player, but you're definitely a bit disappointed in that lack of development in his pass rushing skill set and his pass rush plan. He's kind of like Bonitto, where he really, for the most part, is just trying to get off the ball and bend around the corner. And a lot of times it works, but a lot of times it doesn't. And I think he's a little bit better with his hands, for example, than a guy like Bonitto. He's a little more patient in his approach, but ultimately you got to develop some kind of a skill set here with Drake Jackson, or he's not going to work out. I do like what I saw from him in run defense. They would even occasionally shove him inside, like in between the tackles and short yardage situations. And he showed a lot more like play strength than a guy like Bonitto had, more shedding ability to kind of control his gap in run defense, which is very promising, especially when you project him to the outside as a 3-4 kind of 2-point stance edge outside linebacker. And that's why I compare him to Lorenzo Carter, Leonard Floyd, two guys that have been starters on the edge, guys that are good kind of edge contain players. They have speed to the sideline. They can get off blocks when ball carriers and quarterbacks break the tackle box, so to speak. So you got that sideline contain speed, but enough strength to cut inside and cut off the C gap as well in run defense. And just guys with kind of length and bend and athleticism as pass rushers, but a lack of true skill set to be a dominant down-to-down pass rusher, which is possible for Drake Jackson to develop those skill sets, and you sure as hell hope they come out. But again, he's played a lot of snaps, and the development track with his pass rushing skill set, it hasn't really been there. But it doesn't mean he doesn't do a lot of things really well. So Drake Jackson in that second round group there, really with Nik Bonitto, is just kind of high upside dart throws. And a lot of people are going to have Boye Mafe in that group, but I thought Boye Mafe showed even less than a guy like Drake Jackson or even Nick Bonito. And now it gets fun because my remaining 7 players all have first to second round grades or better. And that starts with Arnold Ebiketie, who I compare very much to Shaq Barrett. Now, I wrote Diet Shaq Barrett because from a production standpoint, Shaq Barrett is just so relentless. He's been towards the top of the league in pressures like the last 3 years. So I don't know if Ebiketie's ever going to produce like that, but just as far as how Ebiketie wins, it reminds me so much of Shaq Barrett. And athletically speaking, they're very similar. And you got to remember, Shaq Barrett was, I think, an undrafted pickup for the Denver Broncos way back when, because no, he's not the biggest guy. He's not the most powerful player, but he has strong arms. He's incredibly quick. He plays with leverage. He has a really good rip move. And he almost has these karate chops that just are relentless. And his motor is always running hot. He's constantly working to the quarterback. And he has enough speed and bend around the corner to at least keep you honest in that way. He has enough power as a bull rusher to keep you honest, but he's not constantly winning with those classic moves. I just think he's going to be a very effective pass rusher at the end of the day. He was in college. We've seen this style in a guy like Shaq Barrett work. So for me, is he the highest upside player? No, but I feel pretty dang good that if you need a number 2 guy right away, I think Arnold Ebiketie can come in and get after the quarterback right away. And that's Arnold Ebiketie in a nutshell. Let's move on to my number 6 guy. And this is going to be one of my hotter takes of this draft season. It's Travon Walker at number 6 out of Georgia. And, you know, like I said, this is pretty far from the consensus rankings. We are now seeing Travon Walker getting mocked 2nd overall to Detroit pretty consistently, like especially in the top 5. This is a guy that came out in Indianapolis and just shredded the combine. Now, I don't think he's a bad prospect. If your team takes him in the 1st round, it'll be me saying, I think it's a risk, but I understand the athletic projection and why teams would be excited about the theoretical upside of Travon Walker. But to me, that's what it is. It's theoretical upside. It is not based on anything that we saw from him on film. And I want to be very clear. I was a Rashawn Gary guy coming out. I liked Gregory Rousseau more than most people last year. I'm not someone that just says, oh, he didn't really produce statistically, so you can't draft him. That's not what it is. When I saw Rashawn Gary, I had to make a video saying the hate has gone too far because this guy has legitimate explosiveness and power, and he was constantly double teamed. He was the focus of opposing offensive lines, and he didn't have the opportunity to continue developing his sack production. Travon Walker, on the other hand, was just another, piece of the machine there at Georgia. Schemed up constantly, utilized in a way that he won't be utilized in the NFL. And there's pros and cons to that. But what I didn't see from Travon Walker was him utilizing his length as a bull rusher. I didn't see him utilizing 4.5 speed to shoot around the edge. I didn't see him apply these great 3-cone drills to, any sort of practical pass rushing ability to win that'll translate to the NFL level. And there's just a ton of work to do with Travon Walker. You need to work on his first step because at Georgia, I will admit, they basically asked him to be a contained rusher. Just stand up, extend your arms, and when, Jordan Davis or Wyatt, Devontae Wyatt or Nakobe Dean on a blitz, when our scheme pushes the quarterback or the running back to you, we want you to shed and make the tackle. And he was damn good at that, and he bought into it. Or inversely, they wanted him to be the stunt man. They were like, okay, we're going to shoot Jordan Davis into your gap, and we want you to wrap around. But almost never were they like, hey, line up and beat the man in front of you one-on-one and get after the quarterback. And there's pros and cons to that, right? You can say, well, imagine if they did. What would he do? But there are moments where they did ask him to do that, right? Line up on the edge, beat the tackle, and he really lacked a Getoff. He didn't have the same pop with his hands that you would hope, given his physical traits. He didn't have the same pop with his hands that someone like Rashawn Gary had, or even a guy like Gregory Rousseau had that I liked last year. I think Rousseau and Trayvon Walker are fairly similar, though. But as far as his ability as a power rusher, it was incredibly underwhelming. And there's no examples of him using any element of finesse moves either, if you want to talk about swim moves or rip moves or any of that. It really was an unpolished skill set. And I understand the upside. I do. I get it as much as anybody. But at the same time, I don't. Because top 5 for this player, when there's 5 more really impressive players in this position group that you could take instead that have great upside but much better tape, I just don't understand it. I really don't. If Trayvon Walker was in last year's class, maybe he would be right up there with guys like Kwity Paye and Gregory Rousseau as the number 1 guy. But this class is just a little different. And for that reason, he comes down as a guy, for me, he's more of a late first round pick, a swing for the fences, but a guy that if he doesn't develop a whole lot, I think you're getting Jalen Holmes. I think you're getting a great run defender and a guy that requires stunts to get after the quarterback. So that's where I'm at with Trayvon Walker. He could easily make this ranking look stupid in 2 years. I get that. I do. But I'm comfortable doing this because I really like our remaining players as well. So I'm definitely curious what you guys think about Trayvon Walker. Do you think the hype has gone too far on this guy with all these top 5 mock draft projections and stuff, or do you get it? Because honestly, I don't. But let's move on to my number 5 guy, Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State. And I was down in Mobile posting Twitter clips and really, with a bunch of other draft analysts just kind of kicking off the hype train. I mean, going into Mobile, this guy was probably a 3rd or 4th round prospect, not someone anyone was really talking about. And he was the most dominant player at the Senior Bowl. Just burst off the ball, power, showed some inside moves as a pass rusher, was dominating in run defense, and just took everybody by storm. I mean, he just was different. And I was on the hype train. I was like, at that point in time, it was a little bit ahead of the game to say this guy's going to be a 1st round pick. And that's where I'm at, is where I was at after the Senior Bowl. But at some point, you gotta the hype train can't just keep going off of the same information. After the Senior Bowl, I watched his tape and I understood why he was a 3rd or 4th round pick before the Senior Bowl. He's got really good tape, but it's very inconsistent. And he has a very much full speed ahead approach as a pass rusher. And he did stall quite a bit. And I was, unfortunately, a bit underwhelmed by his tape. So I hate that I have to use this negative tone because I like Jermaine Johnson as much as the next guy. And I really hope he succeeds and becomes a number 1 pass rusher and all this stuff. But I do think it's gone a little bit too far. I want to see him apply that inside move that he had at the Senior Bowl. I want to see him use that more consistently on tape. He's not a guy that has a lot of bend, so he's going to have to lean on power and inside counters. But ultimately, I think he's a really good player, and I love his effort. That is why I give him a Shaq Lawson on smelling salts comparison. Shaq Lawson was a former 1st round pick, but just didn't always have that high impact pass rushing style, which I think Jermaine Johnson has. He's a little bit faster off the ball. He plays with his hair on fire. He just wants it a little more than a guy like Shaq Lawson. But I also think there's something to be said about his inconsistency on tape. And I don't think he's this perfect top 15 prospect that you can draft and expect to become an immediate starter and down the road potential number 1 rusher. I'm not quite that far with him, but I really like Jermaine Johnson. He's really explosive, fun player to watch. So that's my number 5. But now my number 4 guy, David Ojabo out of Michigan. And straight up, he would be my number 3 edge rusher if it were not for the tragedy of him suffering an Achilles tear at his pro day just last week. Ugh, sucks. Absolutely sucks. I do think it just adds an element of risk that pushes his projection down just a little bit. It just comes down to how comfortable are you with it. I do think with Ojabo, it's worth noting that he's a guy that had a little bit more of that low floor in that, he's only played a little bit. He's still very much developing his pass rush skill set. He needs to add play strength. And while he's rehabbing a torn Achilles, it's going to be harder for him to get that work done earlier. You're kind of delaying it to his second season in a lot of ways. And also, I think it's a partial risk that he doesn't get that insane explosiveness back that he had. And if he loses any of that, if he loses 5%, he's not much different than like a Drake Jackson, for example. So there's just an added element of risk there that sucks. I think he'll be okay. It's why he's still above some of these really good players, but it is something to think about there with Ojabo. Now, what he has on the field, as we mentioned, is insane athleticism. He's got long arms, he's fast, he's got bend. He basically wins with speed and bend around the edge or a nice inside spin move that he's developed. But if he can add a little bit of play strength and add just enough power to threaten that way, add a cross chop, add a rip move, add something else to get in the mix there, it would really help him. He's also a pretty big liability in run defense. I don't think, before the Achilles injury, I don't think he's someone you'd really want on the field on early downs a ton. I just would love to see him add some play strength because he absolutely has the frame to do it. And my high comp for him is Danielle Hunter. And if you go back to Danielle Hunter coming out, he was not this, freaking Hulk that he is now. Very much was a lot thinner, like Ojabo. So I love the upside with Ojabo. He'd be my number 3 guy and a top 15 player in this class before the injury. But it's something you got to think about. But I think someone's probably going to get a steal in David Ojabo at the end of the first or the early second round because of the injury. And I just hope he can come back healthy. But that does push David Karlaftis up to number 3. And I am higher on David Karlaftis than most people I've seen out there. And I don't think he's a top 10 player like we were initially talking about him in the initial mock drafts, if you will. But definitely in the first round, I think you can take George Karlaftis. I really do. I mean, he's got a ton of pop in his hands. He has incredibly quick feet. For all the criticism about him not having speed and not having bend around the edge, which are legitimate criticisms, he is very, very quick, and he can stunt inside very, very rapidly. And he can spin around you as well. So he deploys that with just a compact, powerful rushing style. And he's just incredibly effective. He actually reminds me a ton of Kwity Paye last year, and that, Paye had that same deal where like he could change gaps so quickly, and he had these strong arms, and he just, he didn't have your typical pass rush moves, but because of that quickness and how good he was with his hands, it's just very effective. And that's very similar to George Karlaftis or a Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson a little more with like the power in his arms. So he's somewhere in between there. I think you're getting a day 1 starter, a number 2 guy, someone that's going to give you 8+ sacks, 40+ pressures, year in, year out. That's a first round player. You got to know what you're taking when you draft them. I think if you're a team like the Minnesota Vikings, although they just signed Zadarius Smith, but let's just say before the Zadarius Smith signing, and you want a number 2 complement to a guy like Danielle Hunter, or maybe you're Cleveland before you traded for Deshaun Watson, you want a complement to Myles Garrett, like something like that. He can be that guy for you. You're not drafting him to be Myles Garrett. You're not drafting him to be Danielle Hunter. But I do think there's a ton of value in a surefire physical, productive number 2 edge rusher, enough to draft him in the first round, just like Kwity Paye was for the Colts for me last year. So that's George Karlaftis. And then my number 2 guy, Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan. And to me, this is an upside conversation. If you look at the grading description, if you look at the grading profiles in the description below, you'll see in the 6.8 range is a day 1 starter with high-end starter upside. And in the 6.9 range is a day 1 starter with all-pro upside. And to be completely honest, I would be pretty surprised if Aiden Hutchinson became one of the 5 or 6 best edge rushers in the NFL. He's not the most explosive player. His arm length is lower than you'd like to see. He doesn't really have bend. But what he is an incredibly high floor player. He's going to have probably the highest impact grade of any player in this class. That's how good are you right now. My comparison for him is Max Crosby. And it was funny, I did the Max Crosby film breakdown here on YouTube to commemorate his great season that he had last year. And then I did Aiden Hutchinson like 3 weeks later. And I'm just jotting down notes just as I was with Max Crosby. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like the same player. He's got the great first step. He has a lot of power in his arms. He has very similar pass rush moves. He's got a cross chop. He's got a spin, an inside spin, and he's got a swim move. All things that Crosby used very well on tape. And I think you're getting a very similar player, but his long speed to turn the corner and truly threaten with speed, it's just not there. And frankly, it's not even as good as what Max Crosby has. But again, you're getting to me someone that can be a number 1 pass rusher, which I don't put lightly. I just don't think he can be consistently one of the 5 to 6 best edge rushers in the league. I don't think he has those traits. So that's where I'm at with Aiden Hutchinson. Some people are going to agree with me on this. A lot of people are going to be very mad about it. It's not that I think he's a bad player. He's the highest graded impact grade of anybody in this class. I've got a top 5 grade on him. But for me, when you get to Kayvon Thibodeau, he's the dude I want to gamble on. Now, again, it is more of a gamble. He's not as good as Aiden Hutchinson is right now. But before all of these rumblings about character concerns and all this stuff, which are just flying around right now, you're now seeing Thibodeau getting mocked at like 8 to the Falcons. You're seeing Trayvon Walker consistently go ahead of him. It's just wild to me. What is it that's so concerning about Kayvon Thibodeau? He seems to have his act together. He's clearly like got the work ethic. The guy's a physical freak. Okay, so he cares about money and cryptocurrency. Like, people are allowed to have other interests or certain passions. Like, yeah, he wants to get paid. He plays edge rusher. Surprise. It's a money position. This is a damn good football player with incredible upside. The conversation to me is very weird. So I was actually a little bit lower on Chase Young. I still thought he was great. But I don't think there's this massive difference between Kayvon Thibodeau and Chase Young as prospects, just based on their film and athletic profile. Thibodeau is a physical specimen. When you go from watching Hutch to Thibodeau, he just moves different. He moves opposing players differently. He turns the corner differently. He bends differently. He controls blockers differently. He has those Khalil Mack flashes where it's like, this is going to be a dominant NFL game wrecker type of guy. Now, I think you have to listen to the character concern stuff. Often where there's smoke, there's fire. Sure, that maybe has closed the gap a little bit. But frankly, when I did these two guys, it wasn't much of a debate for me. I'm willing to gamble on Thibodeau's traits because it's not like he sucks. Like, he has a long arm bull rush that he dominates people with. He has a great rip move. He can win with speed and bend around the edge. That's a great starting point. That's like all of the ways that Chase Young won coming out. Frankly, that's all the ways that Myles Garrett won coming out, because when you're this athletic, you don't have to often have a bunch of different pass rush moves. But when you get to the next level, you do have to develop those things. And I don't know. I'm a believer in Kayvon Thibodeaux. I don't know if teams are leaking bad news about him as hopes that he falls to them. You know, maybe the Falcons and the Giants are like, oh, we interviewed Thibodeaux, and God, his interview was just terrible. He just does not care about football. Wink, wink, Texans. Like, I don't know if that's what's going on or what this is all about, but to lower him that far because of reports in a world where I don't even trust NFL reporting that much anymore, it's just a pretty wild overreaction. So Kayvon Thibodeaux's my number one guy. It could blow up in my face. This guy could be lazy like everybody's saying, but I don't have any good reason to believe that. So I'm taking Kayvon Thibodeaux as my number one edge in a very tiny margin. It is an upside versus impact debate. Some teams might value getting a guy that you just feel very good about, like Aiden Hutchinson, and I totally understand that. But if I'm an NFL GM, I have confidence in my coaching and ability to put Kayvon Thibodeaux in a place where he can continue to refine his pass rush skill set. And if he does, it's not going to take too much for him to pass up a guy like Aiden Hutchinson and get on a trajectory where he can be that, Khalil Mack type of top 5 edge rusher in this league. The same way we think Chase Young can get to. But if those things don't happen, you're probably getting Jadeveon Clowney, who's just a really good run defender, has some power, a good number 2 pass rusher. Those traits will still lead to a lot of wins in the NFL. So not so much buying into all of the off-field concerns with Kayvon Thibodeaux. Not going to get scared off by it. I'm going to keep him as number 1, Hutch right behind him at number 2. And that's going to wrap up my top 10 edge rush video. Definitely going to be a lot of disagreement in the comments down below. Do keep it civilized, but I definitely am excited to hear what you guys think. Did I change your mind on any of these guys? Do let me know. Please do hit that like button as well. Subscribe if you enjoy the content. And we'll see you guys next Monday for our first mock draft since all of this crazy stuff has happened. It's going to be a fun one. But I appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you then. Peace.